You know you're one of my favorite people, and we've gotten along so beautifully ever since I met you when I came here. One of the first persons who really took me to heart.
I return the sentiment.
And I took you to heart.
Yeah.
I guess it was our crochet, knitting, or whatever.
Well, whatever. There are other things,
gorgeous...
because what I remember from in the first, my first impression of you when we were at Rudy Sprinkles for the soup on Friday night, you were talking about this adventurous car trip you took across the country with your friends, and it sort of parallel a little bit with me, not totally in the risk that you were taking, but I took a bicycle trip with 3 friends from Germany to Switzerland when I was 16. So that was adventurous too. So I connected on that level with you too.
Okay.
But otherwise, it's just a natural sympathy that we feel for each other.
Really, and then I loved all your knitted stuff, and I kept telling you how beautiful it was.
Yeah. Okay.
Making all these things.
Okay. All right.
But
and you do much better knitting than I do, but you don't seem to admit it. You don't seem to admit it.
You know I can't touch you. You know you're a fabulous knitter. I just look on with admiration.
Yeah.
But we're going to talk about how the church has grown as a welcoming place for all races, but also we want to talk about the people who were black, because that's the most striking one.
But you also asked me to begin with when I first came here.
Yes,
what did I think
when we first
came here? All right.
Because you
So
came
the-
here
so-
in
so
1958, that was
And
a
Little
very-
Rock, I think, happened in 1958. I think it happened in 58.
Yeah, well, it was starting though.
Well, there was,
We had there were some things going on there in 1954.
I see.
But the actual march.
All right, but it was world news. And I had correspondence about that with Bob's parents. Bob's father wrote to me more often than Bob himself. Mm-hmm. See, Bob had gone back to the States in the end of 57, and I went to France. But when he left, I said, I'll meet you in the States, because I had plans to come to America. Mm-hmm. Anyway, the responses of Bob's parents were very opposite. Mm-hmm. His mother sympathized with the plight of the black population. And his father, I remember, I wish I had those letters, which I don't, but he was a parole officer. Mm-hmm. And one comment, I remember that the jails are full of them. Very, very, well, whatever. Mm-hmm. So anyway, this was my awareness. Now, coming here, I encountered black people on the bus, or was it the elevator, going from Center City to West Philadelphia, where my work was. Mm-hmm. And there were these young people going to school, and they were talking, and I didn't understand a word they were saying. It was a different English that I was used to. And when I would walk on the street, my second office was at 16th and Wallace. Mm-hmm. This is where Kent first lived. And when a large group of young people came towards me, I had fear. Mm-hmm. And the overall, if you talk to immigrants here, when they first encountered black soldiers in Germany, they were scared. I remember one woman saying, we went to hide in the bushes, because they had never seen black people before. Mm-hmm. So, and I guess the same would happen if the white people came to Africa.
Well, they thought they had some kind of disease. People from Nigeria told me. They said, because they had known people who were albinos, and so these people who were coming who were had complexions like the albinos, they thought that there were a whole bunch of these people who were suffering from this disease. So
anyway, I was working in West Philadelphia and later in North Philadelphia, and you may know that my first job was with Jim Reeb, who I met the first day in Philadelphia by chance. Jim Reeb.
Yes.
Jim Reeb. Okay. So, Jim Reeb was killed in Selma, Alabama, in March of '65. Mm-hmm. And in our own involvement in the church,
he married you, is that correct?
Yes, he did.
So what year was that he married you? 1959. Mm-hmm. So
he actually then in '59 had his first job in D.C. at All Souls. He left Philadelphia, went to
And he was at this church?
No, he was not at this church. He had been a Presbyterian minister. He'd gone to Princeton, and he was a chaplain at the Philadelphia General Hospital.
Oh, okay.
And he found there that he was preaching to those poor people wasn't the right thing to do. I mean, it wasn't the right thing. It wasn't helping him. The Word of God wasn't helping these poor people that he was supposed to be helping. And so this is how he came to Unitarianism, but you can't change from day one to the next day from Presbyterian ministry to Unitarian ministry. So there was an interim period of time where he was working at the Y as a youth director. And in the same time preaching. He was preaching in various churches in Delaware County mostly. I was not even aware of this church. And we lived in Center City. So, it's really when Jim died, when he died in March of '65, that I came to this church the very first time.
Oh, I see.
The very first time, because I expected that they would talk about him, and they did. And at the same time, I was, with two little children, I was sort of searching myself where to go, where to find a church, where to find a home. And so I came here in March '65, and in May '65, our second son Michael was dedicated here by Max Dascom.
Okay.
So I already took these short steps, and I stayed here. In '66, I became a member.
All right. Now, your husband also was a member here and active?
Well, if you want to know his story, his story is we were always friendly with the ministers here, I mean, on a personal level. And David Park was the minister when we first came. And David Park and Bob Brown had a personal relationship. They would go to ball games together, etc. And so it was more. Bob never really set foot in his church at all. He's come. I could probably count on my fingers how often he was here. When my son got, certain
But he
ceremonies.
Doesn't attend it.
He doesn't attend at all. And the way he became a member is one evening. I think we were just eating dinner. David Park came to the house. And he brought the membership book. And he said, "Here, Bob, sign it." And Bob said, "Okay." So this is how Bob is an official member, and he pledges. He pays money, I mean, I pay my pledge. He pays his pledge, and he could not sit still anywhere. He couldn't, and he doesn't need other. He has his own head, his own mind, and he gets his own information from places that he knows to get. It's not for him to sit in a church pew and.
Well, he has his wife she's going to be praying for him.
I am not.
You're on your own, right?
So our involvement, now here is this, and this happened in the late '60s. There was something called the Black Caucus, right? You know about that,
in the
right?
late '60s.
Yeah, well, it was,
Okay.
mid to late '60s, I suppose. Yeah, late '60s, and it may have gone on to '70s. And Bob would attend all informal gatherings, parties, and so on, okay? And he met Ed Johnson. Ed Johnson is Rosita Johnson's husband.
Oh, yes.
And Bob was doing things in the house, refinishing the basement, and Ed Johnson really caught on. Bob, we'll do this, we'll do. Ed Johnson had the idea to buy up abandoned houses in East Germantown, or Eastman area, East Germantown. Well, sort of borderline. And they formed a group. There were 4 members of this group. It was Ed Johnson, Bob Brown, Barbara Dowdle,
Go away.
and a neighbor of Ed Johnson's. His name was Jim. Okay, the 4 of them sort of formed a partnership. They were borrowing money, and I remember I was in Germany, and they waited for me to come back to sign the note at the bank. I had no job. I had 4 little kids, But I think they borrowed $10,000 to buy these adjoining twins. And the ownership was built up through sweat equity.
Oh, yes.
I was the bookkeeper. How many hours did you work? How many hours did you work? How many hours did you work? And Jim, the neighbor, was the first one to drop out. And Ed Johnson was very difficult to work with. He has his ideas that are out there. Let's get some used nails. Let's get some used. I remember saying, "Ed, you cannot buy used paint." We have to paint this house. Because I was the bookkeeper, money and hours and so on. So it ended up that Ed Johnson and Bob Brown were the remaining owners at one point. One house was finished and it was sold to medical mission sisters who lived there. And so Ed and Bob ended owning up one house, and Bob at that point said, "Okay, Ed, let's get the house appraised. Either you buy it from me or I buy it from you," because there was no way to go forward. And Ed said, "Okay, you buy it from me." So we finished the fixing up, and then we sold it. So sometimes I drive by 436 East Walnut Lane, 430. So that was our involvement with Ed Johnson. And I remember going to parties at the Watlingtons. And, I don't you didn't know Judd Watlington, did you?
No, I didn't know him.
Well, he said to me...
Oh, no, you can have it. You're on.
No, that's okay.
Okay. Well, he patted me on my back. I was going to do that. "You're my kind of nigger," he said to me.
Really? So what did you think about that?
Well, it means he must like me. I don't know. So anyway, there was a lot going on in those days. A lot of partying and gathering and so on.
So you were associating with black people then from the beginning?
Oh yeah. And, well, if this means anything, we bought our first house in '62 in West Mount Airy, and the reason we bought it because West Mount Airy was a consciously integrating area. And, you became aware, even though it was new in this country, that, people would move away if some black people move in, and Mount Airy wasn't like that. And I must say this too, this was part of my motivation for a realtor, to become a realtor.
Oh, okay.
To do the right thing, because I became a realtor in '75.
So you saw a lot of that neighborhood, what they call blockbusting that was going on.
Well, I had an awareness of it.
You're aware of that.
Yeah.
So how did you manage your business around that? Because you must have had some kind of, as you said, you had a kind of feeling about how race relations should be.
Well, I never had any problem showing a house, but there was one situation when I was meeting with a seller to list a house who told me, "We don't want to sell to black people." And I said, "Well, that's against the law. I cannot make any differentiation in that." So I was pointing it out. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to be part of that. We don't discriminate. So.
Oh, that was good. So you always had this precept, this moral understanding about how black people should be treated.
Of course, yeah, of course.
Not of course.
Well, for me it was of course.
For you it was of course.
For me it was of course. But I must say I've never had any, other than that one situation, any problems in the business of somebody protesting or you just. Yeah. I would say the only color that is important is green. If you have the money to buy.
Yeah, that's true. So when you came to this church, what did you notice about the racial climate as you became a member?
Well, not particularly. No, I wasn't particularly conscious. I mean, I take people as people are, so I don't. Black people, I think, experience it differently. But for me, no, I didn't think.
Well, I think white people experience differently too.
Yeah.
But because some have learned not to associate, and they have certain concepts about black people. They're inferior.
That wasn't the case. We associated very well. We went on vacation with the Johnsons. We have some pictures. The kids were little, and no, not at all. There was, in terms of acceptance of black people.
Yeah.
Well, to me, there was no difference. It's a personality that you might come across that you like better than another, but other than that.
Okay, so that's very interesting. When you came to USG, were there was a movement here, because I know there was this woman here who was very actively trying to get a black caucus in church, and Adelera, I think her name was. Do you remember Adelera?
Well, of course I do. Well, she wasn't in the beginning. She was later on. She wasn't. She was here when Nina Gray was here.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't part of any focus of what she was interested in,
Mm-hmm.
but the feeling came through that she was very challenging. You know, what you might have heard,
Mm-hmm.
that I might not have heard directly, but indirectly, about that more should be done.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe so, but I don't have any.
But you weren't involved in
I
that
don't know. I
movement.
don't have any direct information about that.
Well, she did, the little time that I did have to talk with her was that she felt very challenged here. She had some real disputes at GA, and she had some feelings, I think, with Minister Gray. She had some problems.
Yeah, that's filtered through to me in some way, through general conversation.
Right. But you did.
What I felt was maybe she was pushing Nina in a certain direction. I mean, that may have been more than Nina could handle. I don't know. I really don't know. I have no direct information on it.
But it seemed like she wanted to have more black people doing things in the church and coming to the church, and she felt that the church should have made some effort toward that because, she didn't feel that they were doing enough in the political realm either, in what was going on in the community, because the community was really in turmoil around those years, in the 60s.
Oh, no, it wasn't in the 60s. This was, Nina was here, I think, from 81 to 91. Am I right on that?
Well,
yeah.
she was, I think Adelera was here in the 60s, wasn't she?
That, was she here in the 60s? Then?
She was here.
Yeah. But Nina, I think, was here from 81 to 91.
Right.
Yeah.
But she was pressing even at that time.
I see.
When I came, she was
I
still.
see. Okay. All right. I guess I wasn't that aware of it.
So that you have not been aware of the movement in the church toward becoming a more welcoming church. You haven't been aware of it.
Well, when you say more welcoming, once there was a vote about becoming welcoming for the gay community.
The gay community. Well, that was one thing.
But there was a formality. This was a voted formality. I don't think there was such a voting process of it being more welcoming to black people. I think I felt we always were, but not in an organized way. I wasn't aware of any organized way to bring in more black members or attendees.
Mm-hmm. So the church really has a history of, rejecting blacks. It's a history.
I would not feel that way.
Okay, but you didn't feel at this church.
Not
so
at
when
all.
you met
Not
Fran
at all.
and when she
Oh,
came.
Fran, yes, she was here forever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And, but you just accepted her.
Of course,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Well, it's a natural to me, so I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
It's a personality that you relate to, not something
Not
else.
Color.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Now there were some people who really had problems being received here. In fact, Marion talks about it.
Yeah, I hear this.
Yeah.
I hear this repeated.
Mm-hmm.
And
So at those soirees,
and it's shameful.
mm-hmm.
I mean,
those parties that you went to, they never talked about this.
No.
They never talked about it.
No.
Mm-hmm. And it's amazing that, I was thinking about that myself because I said, how could people not be aware of what was going on with black people in a place like Mount Airy where they could see that there was a movement about integrating housing here. There were groups that were organized to stop the block busting.
Right.
And so it was in that period. There was a lot of activity, and there were black Muslims who were in the Mount area who were moving in, and people felt challenged by them. There were the Black Panthers who had a very strong presence in Mount Airy. And I said, how could people not be aware of this? Because it was in the papers, there were things that were going on. And then there was Rizzo, who was very active against black people and what he called was the drug menace. And he was very active against that. And there's a lot of activity in Mount Airy that was happening. And I said, it amazes me that people were not even aware of that. Were you aware of that at all?
I'm accepting of people, but I was not aware that they were a Muslims group or Black Panthers group in Mount Airy as such. No, I wasn't. And Rizzo, he was just a dislikable person, period. And
But you didn't know why, you didn't know what was...
Why? Well, I know I was a poll watcher when he was trying to get a third term in South Philly, so people wouldn't go in. You know, this lady, you know, old lady went in the curtain and she said, "I don't see his name." Well, there was only a question, yes or no, you know, but it wasn't. Anyway, no, but people were not fond of Rizzo, but not specifically because of his attitude towards blacks. I wasn't aware of that.
You weren't aware of that?
No.
And in your circles, they didn't talk about race at all?
No.
I am really amazed. Because, you know, in my circles, we talked about race all the time. I've talked.
Let me say this: my 4 children, went to, you know, and this is very rare. I guess there would always be maybe 2 families on one block. You know, Philadelphia public school teachers would not send their kids to public schools. Our kids went to public schools. And when you look at school pictures, they're a minority in a school picture. There was Houston and Henry School. So, you know, my kids grew up. I mean, as a matter of fact, here's one example. When I took Christopher to college at New Paltz, my oldest son, we got there, and he didn't have a room assignment. And why not? Why not? Well, he said, I wasn't going to give them my social security number. So because he hadn't given them the social security number, or a wrong social security number, they didn't have a room for him. He said, well, all we have is a room in the college dorm. He said, that's fine. That's great. So he felt right at home, you know, because that's how he'd grown up.
And so they didn't have any, they had black friends?
Absolutely, also, absolutely. Still do. Still do. When Michael comes home from Arkansas, he sees Sean. Yeah.
Well, you know, it's amazing, the people who are interviewed from USG, because they have this attitude which is kind of surprising to me, because, you know, I thought people always harbored feelings about black people, or white people did. Because when I talked to my classmates, you know, on our 50th and 60th anniversaries,
right.
They would say, you know, yeah, we were taught, you know, not to associate. You know.
See, I'm an immigrant. I didn't grow up with all of this prejudice.
I know
see?
that people come...
The only thing I experienced, as I told you, was a fear or shock, you know. You know, not knowing something going to happen when I cross, you know, because you didn't know.
Well, the German people whom my daughter lived with in Germany, they said that they were taught, you know, they learned that black people were not supposed to be very intelligent, and they were kind of savages. You know, this was more or less subliminal, but it was there, and they knew that. And when I interviewed, I didn't interview them, but I used to do this is very old, dictaphone, you know. When I first went to New York, I had a job transcribing dictaphone, with cylinders. And they were German Jews. These social workers had their testimony on these cylinders. And they always said that they didn't want to live near black people because they were inferior.
That sounds like the Germans would do, yeah. Maybe I'm not that kind of German.
Yeah. So I said, no, this was in the late 40s, early 50s, you know. And I said, well, you know, that's what they had learned. And they were very angry about having to go to a school where there were black people. And I said, oh my God, I was so angry about those tapes, because I said, how dare they come here with this attitude of my brother was over there dying, you know.
Yeah. You know, I remember when my sister was visiting, we went to the supermarket, and she said, oh, these are all black, all black people in the supermarket. And I wasn't, you know, if I go to the supermarket every day, I don't notice that. But she went in there, and that's what the comment that she made. I was all black people.
You were not even aware.
Yeah.
Well, okay.
Because, well, whatever.
So what do you think we have to do to get people to feel like you do, because what do you think it took to have you to have this attitude? Because generally it's not common.
Maybe that's who I am. I'm accepting of all people.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's
So
who
you're
I am.
really Unitarian.
I don't not well who I am as a
Universal.
person. I'm not saying that's who I am as a Unitarian. No,
Mm-hmm.
I'd say that's who I am as Ingrid.
Mm-hmm.
Whoever it is that I am.
Mm-hmm.
One of these days I'm going to write an
Mm-hmm.
autobiography. I'm reading one that's really very interesting. So anyway, you are who you are. I don't know, accepting.
Mm-hmm.
I'm an accepting person.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I am. Yeah.
So, in your association with other, as members of different clubs and groups here, have you been aware of any of the things when you had black people involved?
Animosity, meaning?
Any animosity?
No, not at all.
Never?
No. Mm-mm.
Mm-hmm.
Not in church, no. Mm-mm.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes I wonder, because I remember I was in that knitting group, and something was lost. I don't know what it was. Somebody took a pattern or something like that, and they couldn't find it. And it's never been found. I don't know if it's ever been found. Somebody lost their pattern at one of the meetings, and I said, I didn't say it, but I said, no, I wonder if they think, because I'm the only black person here.
That's
I'm
so
the one who
silly.
has that
That
pattern.
is, well, to me it's silly, but for you it's a different
It was
experience.
different because they'd always sort of point the finger. Oh, she must have it.
That's
I wonder if
ridiculous,
that's
man.
how they feel.
That's ridiculous. Totally.
Well, I know there's
from my point of view.
from your point of view, but I don't know whether that thing was ever found. But I said, oh,
That's too bad that you had that kind of feeling.
I did because this is the kind of thing that was
Wouldn't
always
it?
laying on us, that well, did you take it? Look at you first. Did you take it? So it's
Well, I tell you, if I'm searching myself and if I should admit to something in that light, is sometimes when I am walking on a street and there aren't enough people around and there's a black man coming towards me, I'm very aware, sort of, So in that way, I'm sensitive.
Well, that certainly is an attitude that you've learned. People have learned that black people are supposed to be, black men are especially supposed to be threatening. So that's a real problem. What do you think, though, we could do with this church to make it more inviting to black people or to other races?
Well, it's everybody walks in this church for the first time, and I'm sure each person comes in with a different set of expectations, needs, anticipation, and whatever it is that person, whatever person reacts to, will want to keep you here or not, or come back or not. So I don't really, differentiate it with, well, basically, here is, Black America in religion is so divided, these mega churches that draw hundreds of people that we never do. And I've gone to black churches to kind of a matter of fact, I took my German visitors, to experience a black church, and they were very, very welcoming to us. Here were these 3 white women, come back and welcome and whatever. So, and I think we do that too. We welcome people.
I think we do that. But there are some attitudes in this church that are hostile. I mean,
that you experience.
I have experienced it. It's very, very covert, but it's there, and I've experienced it. Yeah, but it's so subtle now, where it used to be much different. It would definitely, you see, even here sometimes we'll see a table where everybody at the table, when they're eating, they'll say, everybody is black, they're sitting there.
Well, I always see whoever comes in, sits next to Marion or sits next to you, and I thought, well, this is sort of natural. Then, it's a kind of, you draw.
Right.
I'm part of an international women's club. Well, the Germans are often, we are aware of it, that the Germans always gather in one spot. Oh, let's be aware now, we have to mingle,
Do you speak German sometime?
Well, we have a German coffee for the purpose of speaking German, so we keep it up.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So that's part of it because I do socialize more, say, with Fran, than I do, say, with you.
I always socialize with you.
Yeah, we always talk, but
Yeah.
but it's just that we.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I've known her a lot of years in the first place.
There's a bond. It's a
She-
natural bond.
Yeah, it's a natural. We have like a natural bond.
Mhm.
So, but we would. There's feeling that we would like to make the church more integrated, and I know that Kent works very hard on trying to get more people who speak Spanish here, for instance, and we'd like to open it up too, because there's a lot of work to be done with race relations in our city and nation. And the church might be more part of that than we are. But
For example, making more of an effort if a black person walks in and you don't know them, to make a point to, after the service, to talk to them, be welcoming and whatever. I think us as ushers we're supposed to do that, but as a natural person I would do that.
But the Unitarians just don't proselytize anyway, do they?
Well, but making somebody feel welcome is, that's a
But
human
if
thing.
you're out anywhere, we don't talk about being Unitarians.
Oh,
It's sort of like we keep it very...
The other day I was sitting next to someone and it was visiting a retirement community and they're Christian based, and I have this feeling in me about that. And I was sitting next to this man and I said, well, it's a little bit too Christian oriented, don't you feel? He said, I don't have any problem with that. I'm an Anglican bishop.
Oh, wow. I guess he didn't.
And, well, we would get off the topic, but recently a Unitarian friend, her father was a Unitarian minister, went to live in one of those Christian-oriented communities. And she said, it's really wonderful here, if you don't mind being surrounded by a lot of Republicans. And, and I sense this tolerance on her part, and that's really what we should practice more, being more tolerant of Republicans and other feeling people.
Well, that's true.
Yeah.
That's true. Well, I think that we have moved a lot, for instance, working especially around this new Jim Crow book. Did you read the book?
I bought it here and I started reading it.
I bought it, I remember.
And I started reading it and I said, this is stuff I know. I just don't want to spend the time reading about it,
You knew?
Yeah.
I didn't know what was in that book.
Well, it just, I just didn't, it's all first grade stuff.
Really?
Yeah, I
didn't understand what was in that book because I always say that I'm very active in the whole movement because I'm doing my penance. Because I was one of the people who wanted more police protection on the streets. I was pleased about the whole get the drugs out of this neighborhood thing. And the war on drugs was very important because the drugs were killing the kids in my school. And I was very active with the Rockefeller. I was a Rockefeller Democrat because I was very active with him for having been very tough on drugs, And I said, I was, because it was a menace to the neighborhood, it was just horrible. So now I understand after reading that book what was really happening. I didn't at the time. Mm-hmm. I didn't realize that it was really aimed at black people, and that black people were the ones who were being gathered up. That young white people who were smoking pot and taking LSD or whatever else they were doing, they were, or certainly smoking, using cocaine, were not being persecuted or prosecuted, and even near the rate the blacks were. In fact, twice the blacks were, the sentence for crack cocaine was twice as much as that for cocaine, which was what the whites used. And I didn't realize all of that was going on, and that they had these sweeps, but they were black community sweeps. You didn't see them sweeping in Scarsdale. They swept in Harlem, and they swept in the South Bronx. They didn't sweep in Scarsdale, where the white people lived. And I was not aware myself of that. So, the book really opened my eyes.
I see. I didn't read that far into it, but I just...
See, you made a spot judgment, and I'm surprised.
Yeah, well, I often start a book and don't finish it because it doesn't catch on, So,
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because of your own prejudices.
No, because of how I use my time.
Well,
okay.
Okay. Well, it was an eye opener for me.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, I really do find that it's what has caused me to become much more active in the whole thing about with mass incarceration, because it's been it killed the community, and I'm very aware of it. But I can see how people could live a place so long as you're doing okay, and not think anything about what's going on around you.
This thought just came to me. The neighborhood where I live now, which is Windmore, which is Montgomery County, Springfield Township, our street is so integrated, you have no idea. Not just black and white. It's mixed couples, lesbian, it's Jewish, the old Jewish people, it's Asian people, it's I'm a German, there's a French woman. It is so integrated. But the difference is, because the houses are farther apart, the sense of community does not really get developed as it was developed.
You have high trees between.
It was developed in our area. Yeah.
And
But if you walk down the street, I mean, it's just a mixture of people. Mixture. So I'm proud of that, but it's sort of,
It's that's good. You do have that kind of neighborhood that you live in, but with all your trees around you and your long driveway, you don't really have to do much.
But I always walk a neighbor's dog, so I meet people that way.
Yeah, you take that morning walk.
Right.
Very often.
Yeah.
Well, there were it's broken down a great deal now, but if you're talking about the 60s, 50s, and the 40s.
Yeah.
They were redlined. They were strictly redlined.
Yeah, sure.
And black people had a very hard time getting. Black soldiers returning from the war in 45 had a very hard time getting housing, except in very restricted neighborhoods.
Yeah.
So that people were just not aware of that. I mean, as I've talked to many people here, many of the women who work in this church, whom I really like, they weren't aware of it at all. They weren't aware of
redlining?
They weren't aware that they
well, I was.
You
also with mortgages and so on.
But you didn't do anything.
And also with insurance. Now here, this is interesting. I once went to a hearing. Watlington was an insurance broker, and he had some kind of program to divert redlining in terms of insurance. And I don't know what it is that they did, but anyway, so it was on all levels. It was real estate, mortgaging, insurance,
right.
And so on.
And he was a real estate
no, he was an insurance broker.
Yeah, but he had a hard time getting insurance for black people because you couldn't.
Well, it was mostly the kind of housing, and then maybe black people lived in that housing. But with insurance, it's really the house itself that's at issue. So.
Well, yeah, but getting insurance was very difficult and very expensive for black people because in the black community where I live, Metropolitan Life Insurance would have these agents that come around and you give a nickel a week or something like that. And it was very expensive and very exploitive. the way that black people were able to buy insurance. So it really was not an easy thing to do, you know. But you weren't aware of that, I mean, yeah.
Well,
You just came to the
Well,
country and
well,
you settled in
and I can
felt
tell you,
were welcome.
you know, I sold houses to so. I mean, well, could probably be off record, but with experience in my business. For example, there was one couple. We were looking for a house, and
Are they black or white?
it was black, and the year was '83. Because I remember this, and there was a lottery program that you could win this mortgage in this lottery. And they called me up, they said, we won, you know, we are getting this mortgage. And I said, great, great, great. And then it came down to coming up with the money. They didn't have the money. And I remember it was '83 because that's the year we bought our house. I shouldn't even be telling you this. So I borrowed money from my kids' college, and I lent them money.
Really?
And when I told my broker, he said, I told him afterwards, he said, don't you ever do this again. If it comes down to, it could come down to that you made them buy the house because you gave them money. And they paid me back. So we're still friends.
Well,
We still see each other.
Uh-huh.
I can take her out for lunch every once in a while. She's a widow
Really?
now. Yeah.
So now, did they have trouble getting a mortgage because they were black, or because they just didn't have the money?
No. It was a special program to win. It was a special mortgage issue. You know, I couldn't tell you what, but it was a lottery to win this kind of mortgage money. No, people got mortgage. No, I don't saw discrimination for black people for mortgages.
So when you sold your houses, you sold to anyone, anywhere.
Of course, yeah, of course. That's why
Ingrid,
this is why I told you this was my settled motivation to become a realtor. I mean, to become a realtor it sort of came up. Nobody talked to me about it. It was sort of, you know, I was home with little kids. What are you going to do when they go to school? What are you going to do? And had this idea, you know, and how things were going on in my area. You do the right thing. You become a realtor. You do the right thing. So.
Well, then that's really what makes the difference in you. You know, as far as you know, a person. I feel the sincerity in in the way you behave. And I think other people do too.
Okay.
So I really appreciate your talking with us, Ingrid, because, you know, you said you had nothing to say. I think she had a great deal to say. What do you think, Jeff?
For sure.
I think she had a lot to say. And I think we're going to be able to use a lot of our interview with you.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Okay, pretty soon we're going to have lunch, right?
Yeah, we can.